Hello, all you lovely people, and welcome to D&D Optimized, the show where each week we take a deep dive into one or two specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we do our best to crunch some numbers and optimize it for your character's chosen role. If you, like me, enjoy creating new characters for Dungeons & Dragons and theorizing about what would make really powerful characters in Dungeons & Dragons almost as much as you enjoy actually playing Dungeons & Dragons, then welcome home. This is a place for you. And we're going to theory craft, and we're going to crunch numbers and get a little geeky. And so welcome. Happy to have you. My name's Colby, and I am your host. So today, finally, after a little bit of a delay, I'm going to update all of my the rest of my builds as per Tasha's Cauldron of everything, right? So we went up to Blade Singer. And then I was going to do the rest last week, but I had to do a full episode on the Beastmaster, I think, because it changed so much. So today we're going to do all the rest, so we'll be caught up, and then we can start diving into brand new builds again next week. So in case you didn't notice, I'm trying a new format. I've got some new software and a new camcorder, a new webcam, that is. Hopefully it will increase the the quality, the video quality for those watching on YouTube. Let me know if you have any feedback in that regard. But before we jump in, really quick, just a reminder, we do have a subreddit. Please check it out. It's reddit.com/r/DND optimized, DND optimized. Check us out. Kind of growing a little bit of a community there, and I love it. And I think it's a great place to sort of continue the conversation, not just with me, but with other, fans of the show. And I do pop in and try to give some feedback once in a while, but not probably as often as some of you would like, but I do my best. So anyway, let's just jump right in to the build. So again, we left off with Blade Singer was episode 7. So episode 8, if you recall, was the fighter barbarian who's the better user of the Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master feat kind of thing. And I mean, the build that I did ultimately ended up being a mostly fighter with a barbarian dip. It doesn't really change that much. So the reality is, for this build, the biggest change is just the nerf that it got from the Rune Knight. Rune Knight, when it was in its Unearthed Arcana stage, was overpowered. And that's why it kept popping up in almost all of my builds, right? Anytime I take a fighter dip. You know what? It still might, because it's still really good and fun to play. Having done so, it is both powerful and fun. It did get a straight nerf, though. It used to be, again, that in the Unearthed Arcana version, when you'd use your Giant's Might feature, which you got to do 2 times per long rest, you still do, but it would let you do an extra d6 damage on every weapon attack for 1 minute until it ran out. Now it lasts a minute, same thing, but you get an extra d6 on one attack, basically, in a turn. So definitely a damage reduction. I tried really hard. I spent a lot of time trying to come up with different builds, different ways to look at this, different subclasses, taking mostly barbarian levels, really trying to emphasize brutal critical and getting champion fighter maybe, and even taking a half orc so that when you would crit, you would roll all these extra dice and you were critting on a 19 thanks to being a champion fighter, and it didn't measure up. It didn't. Rune Knight is still good. That extra d6 once per turn is nice, plus the Zealot Barbarian extra d6 once per turn. Just ended up out damaging on average when you crunch the numbers. Now, again, that's not to say that other builds aren't viable, and if you want to play them, you absolutely should, and they can be very fun. It's just, for pure math, we're basically just going to stick with the build. The problem is this: if you're going to play this character, a martial barbarian fighter, right, and you're going to stop playing at around a level 12 or so, then yes, by all means, I would probably go mostly barbarian and pick up a little bit of fighter levels. And it has a very slight edge. But once you hit fighter level 11, and this is not news to many of you, I'm sure, it just pulls away from pretty much every other straight martial class. Because at fighter 11, you get a third attack when you take the attack action, right? Instead of just 2 like everybody else. And nobody can compete with that. It's really, 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 really strong. So now again, as I've kind of shown, I think you still do very well taking a dip into something like a barbarian, where you can pick up rage and reckless attacks especially, but also a subclass which give you some nice perks. I think it's better to do that than just go straight fighter. The numbers will show. But again, when you're trying to decide, do I go mostly barbarian or mostly fighter, the fighters just have the edge. Some things, some nice little pickups that you do get from Tasha's though. So the new primal knowledge feature that barbarians give you an extra proficiency in a barbarian skill of your choice when you get to level 3, which is nice. Fighters can now swap out their fighting style and or battle maneuvers as they level, which is great. But in spite of, basically the nerf, I'm essentially keeping the build pretty much the same. When you hit levels, so I would start, as a not variant human anymore, but a custom lineage, and take your +2 in strength. But you're still better off taking Polearm Master Feat first, and then Great Weapon Master Feat when you hit level 4 in Fighter. When you hit level 6 in Fighter, at that point, then I'd probably take the new Slasher Feat, which gives you a +1 to Strength. So now you'd finally get your Strength to 18, and it's nice because it gives you a little bit of control that this build didn't really have a lot of otherwise. Because with the Slasher, as a reminder, when you hit with a slashing attack, you can reduce an enemy speed by 10, which is nice. And when you crit them, I think it gives them disadvantage on attacks. I hope I'm not confusing that with Piercer. But anyway, it's a nice utility and control. And I will say, the nice thing about Rune Knight is that it also gives you some nice utility and control. And I haven't really gotten into it, but having played this build in a campaign now, I really had a lot of fun with those runes. You can charm people with them. You can cause an attack that they do to hit an enemy, and there's lots of cool stuff in those runes. So it's a nice addition with the Slasher feat to give this character not only crazy damage, but some nice control and utility. And I will say that even though the damage is slightly nerfed, it still does fantastic, incredible damage per round, sustainable damage per round. So as always, I've updated the graphs and the spreadsheets. If you use those, please do check them out. I put a lot of time into them, so I hope that you guys find them useful. But yeah, they're in the show notes or in the video description. You can find links that will talk about not just this build, but it will also compare it to all of the other sustained damage builds that I've done. And now, as of this show, they are all updated. So you can see who the real king or queen of the damage per round charts are. All right, episode 9 was the Bard the Bard Warlock Fighter, and this was the build that I did that was trying to get the most deep damage per round out of a build that was mostly Bard. I think most of us, when we play Bard, we're not doing it because we want to do more damage than anybody else in our outer table. It's because we want to be a Bard. We want to sing and dance and maybe seduce and be the face of the party and and support, and also, when necessary, dish out some damage. And so this kind of was the goal, was to let you do all of those things and stretch that damage as much as we could, right? So I'm going to stick to that sort of goal and concept here. Bards do get some nice added versatility with Tasha's, which seems to be the theme of that book, really. You can now swap out your cantrips, or even the skills that you picked for your expertise feature as you level, which is nice. Inspiration can now optionally be used for healing, to add to healing that somebody does, another character does when they have your inspiration, which is awesome. We'll talk more about healing later on in this episode. There are some new colleges which are interesting. The College of Creation is tempting. It's pretty cool, and it lets you like animate objects and create things, and among other things, you can sort of create this sort of animated creature that can attack for you on your bonus action. So that's tempting, but we're typically, for this build, we're using our bonus action for our hand crossbow attacks, and ultimately it was less damage. So I decided to not opt for it, but it looks cool and fun. Check it out. College of Eloquence, the other new college introduced in Tasha's, also looks really great for those who really want to focus on being super eloquent and inspiring and all of those things that you kind of think about when you think about bards, right? But they seem to be best for support characters, so we opted to not go that route either. As for spells, bards just got a couple of new spells in Tasha's: Intellect Fortress and Dream of the Blue Veil, which are both cool, but they're pretty niche. And they don't do a lot for us for this build in particular with our goals, so I'm not going to get into it. At the end of the day, unfortunately, this is another build that takes a little nerf from the Rune Knight nerf, and so we're actually not going to go as far into fighter as we were previously, because Rune Knight is just not as strong as it was, and I just don't think that it's worth it, really. You definitely still benefit from at least one level of fighter, though. That archery fighting style is fantastic for anybody who's going to be doing sharpshooter, where again, I talked about this last week, where you're getting a plus 10 to damage at a minus 5 to hit, right? Having that plus 2 to hit from archery is huge for us and for our DPR numbers. You could, of course, take the new, there's a new feat that allows you to, I think it's Fighting Initiate, that allows you to take a fighting style. And so you could potentially spend one of your feats or ability score increases, right, when you get those options, to take this. The problem really becomes, when would you take it? And I feel like you would have to delay it so much that, frankly, I would rather spend a level in fighter to get it than, and so I can have it earlier than having to wait, for that every fourth level, and spend a feat on it, because then you're just not going to be able to get it until much later. Speaking of fighter levels, yes, of course, if you were to take 2 levels, Action Surge is nice. And at level 3, I probably would still take Rune Knight, and that does give you some nice utility and support options, and a little extra damage, but I think we're better off going all in on Bard after we hit level 3, and I'll explain why in a minute. So the biggest change that I probably make here then to the build is, aside from not taking any more fighter levels after 1, would be to start custom lineage, call yourself a custom elf, and take Elven Accuracy as your free feat. Now, I know there's some debate on this, and some of you think that that's not permissible, rules as written. I did come out with a little sliding into my DMs episode last week where we debated this a little bit. It wasn't much of a debate, let's be honest, because all of my DMs kind of said, yeah, I think I'd let you do that. Maybe they are too nice and your DM is not. But I think there's a good argument to be made for allowing it. If you can't, if that's not going to fly at your table and you can't do, you can't take the custom lineage race and then call yourself a custom elf and thereby give you access to, elven accuracy, you could still just go changeling, like I did in the original build, so that you can start with an 18 dex. It would be a bummer, 18 charisma. It would be a bummer to miss out on the elven accuracy, but your numbers will be slightly less, but not crazy worse. Especially at low ACs, they're basically going to be the same, low enemy armor classes, that is. So, to review, we're starting level 1 fighter. We're getting a hand crossbow, right? Then we're taking at level 2, we're going warlock, hexblade, so that we can use our charisma for our attack. Of course, all of the other things that bards want a high charisma for. And I love how that kind of meshes the best of both worlds for us there. You're going to be really strong through mid-game, right? You're taking a free feat crossbow expert, so you can get, as a bonus action, an extra attack every single turn. You're going with the sharpshooter feat still. And it pretty much follows the original build for the most part from there on. Couple of differences. When you hit Bard 10, instead of optionally taking as your magical secrets Holy Weapon, which we were doing before, we're going to go for Spirit Shroud. And I've had a lot of people talk in the comments about this spell, Spirit Shroud, and a lot of people arguing that it is better for the Blade Singer, and it's not. Sorry. Do the math. It's very close, though, and still a worthy consideration. But for us here, Spirit Shroud is great, and there's a couple great things about Spirit Shroud. So what happens is you cast the spell, and then basically when you attack a target, it requires your concentration. And then when you make an attack against a target, it does extra damage, right? And that's fantastic for us because we're going to be doing 3 attacks a turn, and it's an extra 1d8. When you cast it as a level 3 spell, when you upcast it, it scales, and it scales better than Holy Weapon. Holy Weapon was basically just an extra 2d8 for every weapon attack. This, at a level 5 spell, is 2d8, and that's what Holy Weapon was. So when you upcast it to level 5, it's the same, but then it will scale. You can upcast it at a level 7 spell, and now it's 3d8 damage, which is great. And it gives us something that we weren't getting out of Holy Weapon. That said, you're still better off at kind of mid and higher enemy armor classes to use greater invisibility as your concentration, thereby granting you advantage on all of your attacks, especially with elven accuracy, right? And then you're getting triple advantage. You get to roll 3 dice when you have advantage instead of 2, as long as you're making a dex or charisma or intelligence or wisdom based attack. And so for us, we're going to stick with greater invisibility depending on the enemy, depending on their armor class. And if you look at the graphs, I've actually got in there both when you want to turn off the sharpshooter feat, so you're not getting that -5 to hit penalty anymore, right? And when you want to use greater invisibility versus switch to Spirit Shroud. The bummer is that even though it's a 3rd level spell, you don't get Spirit Shroud until you hit Bard 10, because it's not a Bard spell by default. You have to use a magical secrets on it, right? And you're not going to get that until Bard level 10. But then as soon as you get it, you can instantly start casting it as a 5th level spell and get that extra damage when you do want to use it. And so that's great. Let's see. Other than that, I did want to mention, once you hit Bard level 14, right, you get Master's Flourish. Now, we were going College of Swords here, both so that you can get an extra attack once you hit Bard 6, and because they can use they can expend a use of their Bardic Inspiration to do some extra damage. Slashing Flourish, right? Which is nice if you don't need your inspirations for purposes of helping out your teammates. Which you probably will, so you might not actually be using it all of that much. But once you hit 14, you get Master's Flourish, which basically lets you do that Slashing Flourish once per turn every time. You only get a d6 of extra damage instead of whatever your Bardic Inspiration is. But one thing that I didn't mention that I think is important to note is that not only do you get to do that extra damage to the target that you're attacking, but if there's an enemy within 5 feet of you, then you can do the damage to them as well. And that's not going to happen a ton, hopefully, because you're a ranged character and you're going to be trying to sort of stay away from the bad guys, right? But it's a nice to have when you need it. And of course, once you hit level 14, you're going to be able to get that for free all the time. This is a good reason why I think we just go straight Bard instead of going into 3 levels of Fighter to pick up Rune Knight, because coincidentally, as a Rune Knight, you got to do an extra d6 of damage once per turn, and getting to Master's Flourish gives us an extra d6 of damage once per turn for free, and of course lets us just get to all of the other cool Bard features and spells and abilities and things that we're kind of building this character around in the first place. So Fighter 1, Warlock 1, Bard X, and you get to be the all-singing, all-dancing crap of the world and do pretty good damage while you're at it. Overall, the build got a nice little bump, actually, because assuming you're starting with Elven Accuracy, and getting, bumps from things like Spirit Shroud that we weren't having before, Tasha's. So overall, it's a nice bump for us. All right, episode 10. Episode 10 was the sustained damage per round spells episode, where I just talked about spells, not a specific character build. I'm not going to talk a lot here. Most of the spells that I would talk about here to update that particular episode for, we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. So the summon spells are amazing for sustained damage per round. They have a low to no resource cost, requiring your concentration only, but you don't even have to use your bonus action or your action to get some nice damage per round after round out of those summon spells. That's great. Blade of Disaster has potential to be really good if you can get advantage on every attack, and it makes sense to blow a 9th level spell slot on something like that, which it's hard to justify, but you could make the argument that it would have some situational use, and would be a good use of a 9th level spell. And then of course Spirit Shroud is great for sustained damage per round, as I've just talked about, particularly for characters that are getting lots of attacks in a turn. I'm thinking Monk would be maybe the best one to benefit from this. Instead of Munger, like I did, do a Monk Lock build. You'd have to get your Warlock levels up to 5, because Spirit Shroud is available to Warlocks at the 5th level, but your spell slots refresh on a short rest, just like Monk's key points do. So that's really nice. And you get all of those other goodies by getting a Warlock 5 and that extra d8 of damage every single attack when you're making 4 spending key points. Episode 11, the Death Cleric. You guys, I just rolled this character for a new campaign that we just started a week ago, and I'm so excited about it. It is so good. It's so fun. So I still started as a Fighter 1 to get the Constitution and therefore Concentration proficiency save, plus Heavy Armor proficiency, which is really nice. I went custom lineage and then took Warcaster as a free feat and a +2 to my wisdom out of the gate. My guy is a custom Dragonborn, and he doesn't have other Dragonborn abilities because he's the runt of his clutch. It's awesome. Having Constitution save proficiency plus advantage on concentration checks at level 1 makes it so easy to maintain concentration, which is really, really important for this build. So there's just a couple of things to mention for this Death Cleric build in regard to Tasha's. First of all, I hate to say I told you so. Just kidding. I love to say I told you so. I totally called it. Come on, give me credit. I talked about how it seemed like the way that it was written in the player's handbook, that they were almost saying, you can take either Divine Strikes, which gives you an extra 1d8 on your weapon attacks, or Potent Spellcasting, which let you add your Wisdom modifier to your cantrip, to the damage on your cantrips. And they basically did that with Tasha's, almost. So now you get this new optional feature called Blessed Strikes, which says when a creature takes damage from one of your cantrips or weapon attacks, you can also deal 1d8 radiant damage to that creature. And this character build never, ever uses a weapon attack. I mean, it is just Toll the Dead all day, every day, right? So now you don't even have to try to convince your dungeon master to let you get some extra damage on your cantrips. Unless they're not letting you use anything from Tasha's. But if they are, now when you hit them with that Toll the Dead, you get to roll an extra 1d8 on top of the damage that you're doing, which is just a straight up buff to an already very powerful build. Now, something to add here. Keep in mind that because we're a Death Cleric, right? This was the whole concept of this character was on sort of doing damage to multiple targets, right? So we're using Spiritual Guardians that does damage in a 15 feet from you in all directions to characters, and then because you're a Death Cleric, when you use a Necromancy cantrip, of which Toll the Dead is one, then as long as there are two enemies standing next to each other within 5 feet of each other, you can damage both of them, right? And then as a bonus action, we were using spiritual weapon. Now, does the new Blessed Strikes give you damage to one target or two targets if you hit two targets with your cantrip? Before you chastise me, it says that when a creature takes damage from a cantrip, you can deal 1d8 radiant damage to that creature. It doesn't say when one creature takes damage from your cantrip. I think there's a very good argument here to be made that, hey, if a creature is taking damage from my cantrip, they get an extra 1d8. Doesn't matter if there's one or two of them. Now, it does also say that once you deal this damage, you can't use this feature again until the start of your next turn. I mean, I don't know that it needs to be sequential, right? Maybe you're just dealing that damage at the same time simultaneously to two characters. Or maybe your Dungeon Master will say, no, it only applies to one. Talk it out with your DM. I have done so, and surprising probably no one, having met my DMs and realizing how cool and awesome they are, I got the green light for it to count against two targets. And that might be a little OP, but when was I concerned about being OP? I really hope Preston isn't watching this episode. So anyway, talk it over with your DM, but there's a good chance that now you can do an extra 1d8 of damage to two targets, assuming, of course, that they're standing next to each other and you're hitting them with Toll the Dead. Also, clerics do get a cool new little feature that is that basically lets you convert your unused channel divinities into spell slots. It lets you do that 1 to 3 times per day, depending on your level. But since you regain your channel divinities as a cleric on a short rest, unlike paladins that get it on a long rest, it can be a really nice way to kind of keep your spell slots going, right? If you're in the middle of the day and you're running low on spell slots and you're about to take a short rest, if you've used one channel divinity but not two, go ahead and convert them into spell slots and then take a short rest, and now you've got both of your channel divinities back. So that's really cool and a nice little feature. Not a lot else changes with this build, but I will mention that for a fighting style, when I did this character, I took the new interception fighting style. I was tempted to do defense to get that +1 to armor class, but interception is really cool. I've talked about it before. It works similarly to the protection fighting style. Protection fighting style let you, as a reaction, when an ally is standing within 5 feet of you, you use your shield to cause the attacker to have disadvantage on the attack. Interception is similar. They're within 5 feet of you. You have to have either a shield or a martial weapon. And as a reaction, if your buddy takes damage, gets hit, you can intercept some of the damage. So it's you roll a d10 plus your proficiency bonus and subtract that number from the damage that they take. And I just liked it better than protection because it's guaranteed damage reduction as opposed to maybe making the attack miss. And while imposing disadvantage can be really strong in some situations, it can be fairly worthless if the buddy that you're protecting has like a 12 armor class, and or the enemy that's attacking them has a +10 to hit, right? They're probably going to get hit anyway, even with disadvantage. So interception, I liked a little more. I will also say that magic items, man. So we started these characters at level 8, and my dungeon master was kind enough to say, okay, everybody can choose one magic item of rare or lower quality. And so I took the new from Tasha's Amulet of the Devout for this character, and it's so good. Oh my gosh. So it's as a rare version of this item. Remember, you can get an uncommon, rare, or very rare version of this and other like spellcasting focus type magic items that are new in Tasha's. The uncommon gives you a +1, rare gives you +2, very rare gives you +3. But so as a rare magic item, it gives me a +2 to all of my spell attack rolls and my difficulty checks, that spell DC for enemies to resist my spells. My spiritual weapon now has a +9 to hit at level 8. Enemies have to make a wisdom save of 17 or better, of 17 or better to not take full damage from my spirit guardians and Toll the Dead at level 8. Nobody's making that save. And when I one more level, when I hit level 9, I'm gonna put points into my wisdom score, and my proficiency bonus goes up, so it's gonna be a 19 at level 9. I love numbers. Why do I love numbers so much? I am an English guy. I got a master's degree in British and American literature. I hated math in school, but man, in D&D, I love it. I love them. So anyway, this build is super awesome and super fun. If you haven't watched the episode, obviously, go back and watch it because I'm kind of glossing over things like I'm doing for all of these builds, sort of assuming that you have. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions on it, but highly recommended, super fun. All right, episode 12, the Tankadin, the Paladin tank. Not a lot is going to change here. I wanted to emphasize something because I saw some comments. This character was optimized for tankiness, for being hard to kill, right? But as I feel like I discussed, but maybe not enough in the episode, just being hard to kill doesn't by default make you a good tank as we think of tanks, right? Somebody that's there to not only be hard to kill, but also sort of protect and aid their allies and prevent their allies from getting attacked and, things like that. So if you're not a threat at all and the enemy has no good reason to attack you, then, especially in Dungeons & Dragons, they might just go hit something else. And so I wanted to emphasize some things. My idea was that you would be doing pretty decent damage between your improved Divine Smite and your regular, smite that all paladins get. And of course that you would be healing a lot as well. This character is as much a support as a tank, the way that I envision them. And it's really fun to be able to do both. But so, between Lay on Hands that paladins get, that's a nice heal, your Channel Divinity heal, which is great, and your healing spells that you get, plus your auras and things, you're probably, you're really a pretty decent support healer type character here. You're probably, for your concentration, better off, realistically, using Aura of Vitality as your concentration spell instead of Shield of Faith. I was using Shield of Faith when I was crunching the numbers because it gave you a +2 to your armor class. And you already have a really great armor class, right? And so especially if you're finding that you're just not getting hit that much from the enemies, throw up something like Aura of Vitality that will do healing to characters, within the range of your aura every turn. It's super strong. Also, of course, make sure to make liberal use of things like your Compelled Duel spell and your sort of soft taunt Channel Divinity as an Oath of the Crown paladin here, to try and encourage enemies to attack you, or at least keep them from moving. And finally, of course, as I mentioned, your auras are super powerful, huge support, tanky boon to your allies. That is how you play this character in game. It was probably pretty intuitive for a lot of you, but it seemed worth mentioning that, to really be a good tank here, you need to do more than just not die, right? I would also, for that reason, probably consider taking the new Slasher feat from Tasha's at level 12 instead of, I think I had mentioned Toughness, taking Toughness before to just increase your survivability. Slasher's nice because, again, slowing your enemies, it's not going to stop them dead in their tracks, but it could prevent the bad guys from getting to the back line and attacking your friends, so that's cool. And I would probably consider switching to the intercept fighting style, as opposed to protection, for the reasons that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Especially for this guy, though, when you hit level 7 as Oath of the Crown, you get a nice feature that lets you, as a reaction, essentially take damage for a friend. And so there are a lot of uses for your reaction for this character. But a nice thing is that now, thanks to Tasha's, we get to swap out a fighting style every time you gain enough levels to get a new ability score increase or feat. So you could start with Intercept, for example, and then once you hit Pally 7, or Pally 8, I guess, swap it for maybe just the defense fighting style to bump your armor class, since now you've got another reliable use of your reaction to kind of help your companions out. So that's nice. Like clerics, paladins now have the option to get their to swap out their Channel Divinity use for more spell slots a number of times per day. It's a little tougher to justify on a paladin because, like I mentioned, you only get your Channel Divinities refreshed on a long rest, and we make really good use of our Channel Divinities on this character. I guess the Death Cleric did too. I didn't even mention that. A lot of extra damage for Death Cleric, so that's really nice. But anyway, they're good heals and control/tankiness options with our Channel Divinity, so I don't imagine us swapping those for spell slots particularly often with this character anyway. Other than that, I would say my favorite magic item from Tasha's for this character is the Devotee's Censer. It's a flail. It's kind of like a Morning Star. It does a D8 of damage, right? But it's a magic item, so when you hit an enemy, it does an extra D8 of damage. So that's 2 D8 of damage, which is really great because it stacks with your smites, right? And so that's potentially some pretty decent damage if you could pick this up. But my favorite thing about it is that as a bonus action, you can make it emanate a cloud of incense. And for 1 minute, you and everyone within 10 feet of you, in typical paladin fashion, right, regain an extra 1d4 of hit points at the start of your turn. So that's some nice sustained healing. Couple that with Aura of Vitality, and you do some really nice sustainable healing turn after turn for very low resource cost. Plus, you're a great tank, really hard to kill, and you do some decent damage. So this character could be a really fun, really great tank to play. Episode 14, Brainy and the Beast, the Wizard Druid combo team up build episode. There's not a ton to change here. I wouldn't consider changing the Wizard subclass from Chronergy, which is what we went before. That gave us so many great features. And going like Bladesinger or Scribe, which were both introduced in Tasha's, just don't really fit the bill for what we're looking for here. The new Druid subclasses are super awesome, and I plan on probably doing a build that features them at least one, if not multiple times in the future. I still think that the Druid, the Circle of the Land, Underdark, is really important to this team because it gives you access to some control spells that you just otherwise wouldn't get access to. And again, this team up build was all about area control coupled with area damage, right? Sustainable turn over turn. And so it was nice to be able to sort of choose who's taking control, who's doing the damage, and being able to both kind of fill those roles. I will say that, the Spore Druid should get at least an honorable mention thanks to the level 10 ability that they get, Spreading Spores, which basically lets you lay down some concentration-free area damage in a 10-foot cube, and it persists for a minute. So that's really nice, and a really nice addition to your damage, your area effect damage. So consider Circle of Spores, I think, here, if you're confident that your wizard can handle all of the control function. And they want to do that, I guess, too. Let's see, another noteworthy addition here is that druids do now get Incendiary Cloud as a level 8 spell. Previously, that was not accessible to them, and your area damage was sort of capped almost with Cloud Kill. Incendiary Cloud's just a little bit stronger, a little more area damage. Functionally, it works very similarly. I would also like to mention the new cantrip, as per Tasha's, called Mind Sliver. This is a great little cantrip. So basically you cast it, and if your enemy fails an intelligence save, then they take a little damage, but then more importantly, they have to subtract a 1d4 from their next saving throw. Obviously, since most of the damage and the control that this team is laying down is dependent upon saving throws, right? Failed saving throws, that is. Being able to lower the enemy's save is huge. Unfortunately, you can't upcast it or anything to affect multiple targets, because really our goal was to try and hit lots of enemies, right? So that's kind of a bummer. But it could be good, once you've thrown out your control and thrown down the damage, then start mind slivering people so that they kind of stay in control and continue to take that damage. That can be really nice. Another great spell for this combo, Tasha's Mind Whip, is a new spell in the book. And if you hit an enemy with Tasha's Mind Whip, they take damage, and this is the best part. On their next turn, they have to choose whether they take an action or a bonus action or a move. They can only do one of those things, right, if they fail their save. So let's say they're stuck in your web spell. In order to try and get out, they have to use their action to try and break out of the web, right? So they use their action. Even if they succeed, they can't move. So they're still stuck, right? They're still stuck in your web. So that's really great. Again, one of those things that once you've laid down... See, the great thing about this combo, if you remember, is you're using your concentration to sort of lay down control and then lay down area of effect damage, but then you would have your actions free on subsequent turns to do things like, Mind Sliver and or, Mind Whip and things like that. So it can really help you sort of keep them where they are and keep them taking damage round after round. Magic items, of course, for the druid, try and get the focus. It's called a moon sickle. It adds, just like I talked about with the Death Cleric, it adds to your spell to hit difficulty check, your spell to hit and your spell difficulty check, which is obviously huge for this build. And the wizards get a similar item. They get a lot of books, a lot of spell book options, but my favorite's the Arcane Grimoire that essentially does the same thing. And it buffs your Arcane Recovery, so you can get higher level spells on your Arcane Recovery. And the Moon Sickle, I should mention, for druids, does buff your healing by 1d4. So anyway, not a ton of changes, some minor little buffs and options to consider, but still a really fun and great team-up combo. Episode 15, the Support Bard. I love this character, and I look forward anxiously to playing them in-game sometime soon, hopefully. I will admit, they are just a teeny bit diminished by Tasha's, and not because of any direct nerfs to the build, but the thing that made this character so amazing, in my opinion, as a support character, was that, especially as a lore bard, you got to cherry pick all the best support and healing spells from every single class in a way that was very unique to you, that nobody else really got to do. And Tasha's probably not... I probably shouldn't criticize them for this, but they've opened up the spell book a little bit for some of the other classes, particularly with aura spells. So now clerics get those paladin auras, which were very unique to paladins. I feel bad for paladins. They're just not quite as special a flower as they once were. Clerics get that aura of vitality and aura of life spell. Druids just get aura of vitality, but still, it's just like, it just doesn't feel quite as cool to be the bard that gets to take all of the best things from everybody. But I'd still probably go with bard, and I'll explain a little bit more why. Druids, so this character, if you remember, took one level of life cleric and then the rest bard. Primarily for that plus to healing that you get as a life cleric. Now, druids have this new circle of the stars, and it's really strong. It might supplant the life cleric as the best healer in the game. So you expend one use of your wild shape, and that's the reason why I say might, is because it is limited. It's not perfectly sustainable. You have to expend one use of your wild shape, and then you turn into a starry form of your choice that come with a variety of options. But if you take the chalice option, your heal spells heal the target or any other creature within 30 feet of you for an additional 1d8 of healing plus your wisdom modifier, and later that goes to 2d8. So you could potentially heal multiple targets, or you could heal one for a lot of extra healing, right? Couple that now with a single level of life cleric, and suddenly even the teeniest healing word spell just heals for boatloads of damage. And it almost feels like they're trying to give you a way to do the opposite of what I argued in the episode that when I talked about this build, was that, like, you can't just stand back and heal all the time and keep everybody topped off. And it almost feels like Wizards is going, well, maybe you can, or maybe we're going to try and push you in that direction anyway, giving you some great options. All of that said, Lore Bard, I think, is still the only way. It's the way to go, because it's the only way you can get all of the spells we want in a single package. And it also gets the best use, in my opinion, of your Bardic Inspiration, Cutting Words, plus Vicious Mockery, which is both hilarious and a really great and sustainable use of your action. So we're sticking with Bard as the best all-rounder for support. Although you might want to consider, instead of going Life Cleric, going Druid of the Stars, or maybe even both, though that's going to delay your Bard stuff a little bit. I probably wouldn't do both, but it's an option. Also, apparently Wizards of the Coast totally listened to this episode, because they gave Bards mass healing word, which they should have always had. And, you've got these new colleges. I talked about them a little bit already. They don't really add enough for our purposes to take over Lore College, I don't think. College of Creation seems cool. But again, it seems more for like combat and or utility. College of Eloquence, I'll talk a little bit more about. It is actually tempting here. So it makes you even better at persuading and deceiving people, which can be nice and fun. But what's more intriguing to me is the way that it really stretches your inspirations. So at level 6, when you go College of Eloquence at level 6, if someone that you give inspiration to uses that inspiration, but then fails their check anyway that they were using that inspiration for, they get to keep the inspiration, which is just awesome, right? Really strong. Then later, later on, as you gain levels, if someone uses your inspiration and succeeds at whatever check that they were attempting, then as a reaction, you can give someone else inspiration within 60 feet of you. You can only do that a number of times per day equal to your charisma modifier, but still 2 fantastic ways to really stretch your inspiration so that everyone's just going to have inspiration all the time when you're an eloquence bard. And as a support focused character like this character is, those are tempting and really great. Still, I'd take cutting words and extra magical secrets over that personally. But it's definitely worth a look, especially if you want to be the most eloquent and inspirational of all bards. Favorite new magic item, of course, is the Rhythm Maker's Drum, which adds, and I said +2 when I was talking Wizard and Druid, but of course it's +1 or 2 or 3, depending on the level of magic item, right? But it adds a plus to your spell to hit and your difficulty check. So you'll be much more effective at viciously mocking your foes. But then it also gives you an additional use of your bardic inspiration once per day. So they're really giving you lots of ways to stretch your inspiration and be even more inspiring than ever before. Episode 16, the Yin Yang build. So this was my second team up combo build, and it was basically not 1, but 2 Hexblade Warlocks, and aren't we all just sick to death of Hexblades? I won't spend a lot of time here. Actually, I think it will be a lot of fun and is incredibly powerful and did tons of damage. For the Yin, so the concept was to have like 1 dark and 1 light, right? And for the Yin, the dark one was just basically full Hexblade with a little bit of a fighter dip. I already discussed my update actually to the original Hexblade build a couple episodes ago. The Yin here is basically that, so go watch episode 18 if you haven't yet. As I mentioned there, late game, the Yin takes a little bit of a hit, thanks to the nerf to Rune Knight, which is what we were going. But they get an early game buff, being able to start with both a free feat and Elven accuracy, theoretically, with an 18 charisma, right? So from level 1. So there, but that isn't going to change very much. As for the Yang, the light, we were starting 5 levels of sorcerer, so that we could get twin spell and haste, right? So that both of you could benefit from haste, you and your Yin. So you'd both be benefiting from haste and from darkness, and Polearm Master, Great Weapon Master, and you were just dishing out boatloads of damage. That doesn't change. I think we still need to start 5 levels of sorcerer. We were going Divine Soul as our sorceress origin, primarily because it really fit the theme that I was going for, the whole light and dark thing. But also because it gave you, access to the cleric spell list, and so it just let this character be, have lots of nice support and healing options, and so you're not just both, melee damage dealing characters all the time. I will mention the new sorceress origin, the Aberrant Mind. It seems cool. It's kind of inspired by, all the tentacle monsters, right? I just don't think it's quite as good for this team up. I love the way that it lets you communicate telepathically with your yin, basically, or others in your party, of course, but it really kind of solidifies the bond between you. In my head, I imagine these characters as like twins, like a light and a dark one or something, and now you can communicate telepathically with them all the time. But other than that, I think you get more out of the Divine Soul. Plus, I think it fits the theme a little bit better. So that's how I would do it. But other than that, not a ton of changes for the Yin Yang combo. Episode 17, the one that I have been most looking forward to talking about all week long, the Swashbuckler episode. So, last one, right? As several of you have pointed out, and I even went so far as to put out an errata correction video right after releasing it. You cannot, of course, as I talked about doing in this video, cast Booming Blade as your action, and then make an offhand weapon attack a la two-weapon fighting, because you're not actually taking the attack action when you cast Booming Blade. Therefore, you cannot, make a bonus action weapon attack with your offhand, right? So that screwed it up, and it messed up the numbers a little bit. The numbers were correct, right? It's just they weren't as per what I was saying in the video. The numbers were correct in the spreadsheets and the graphs, sorry. So that then led to some conversations about, well, now what do we do with our bonus action? We don't really need, as a swashbuckler, to get the cool disengage as a bonus action that rogues get for their cunning action, right? Because swashbucklers can run up and make an attack, and then if you make an attack against somebody, they can't take an opportunity attack against you, so you could sort of back away and disengage for free. And that was integral to the build, right? So I got a bunch of suggestions, some good ones, some decent ones. One was, to go Horizon Walker for your subclass instead of Hunter, which would let you basically, as a bonus action, you set up so that your attack then deals an extra 1d8 of force damage. Had a little edge over the Hunter, which didn't get the d8 if the target was at full health. And force damage is nice, right? A little harder to resist. So that was kind of better than nothing. Another suggestion was to use the new, in Tasha's, we get a new option it's called Steady Aim that rogues get. And basically at level 3 rogue, you can use your bonus action to take aim. So you get advantage on your next attack. But we were already getting advantage because we had an owl, right? A summoned owl that for some reason my mind is blanking on that spell right now. Find familiar, thank you. We had a familiar, and they were giving us advantage. We were only making one attack. The familiar was giving us advantage on that. I mean, that maybe would have let us get something instead of having a familiar, right? But the biggest problem with take aim is that you can't move before or after, which sort of ruined the whole move up, hit them, and then back away so that they have to chase you and take extra damage from Booming Blade, right? Take aim seems fantastic if you are a ranged focused rogue, but maybe the best suggestion, I think, was to take the new Poisoner feat from Tasha's. So in case you don't know, Poisoner is pretty cool. It basically lets you brew these vials of poison, and then as a bonus action, you basically coat your weapon or dip it maybe in the vial with poison. And then when you make an attack, they have to make a DC Constitution save or take an extra 2d8 of poison damage. That's great, but it's very expensive. The vials of poison were 50 gold each, and they only had a number of charges equal to your proficiency bonus. So you would be spending money through the nose in order to take that Poisoner feat and kind of get the full benefit from it. So we still had this conundrum. But then Wizards of the Coast in all of their glory updated the Beastmaster. And we talked about this at length last week, and this was part of the reason why I wanted to do Beastmaster 2.0 before we got here. Because now you get a primal companion as a Beastmaster, and they can make an attack on your bonus action. Hallelujah. So we were already taking hunter levels, right? For the duelist fighting style, which was nice. For the spell of being able to get Hunter's Mark for that little bit of extra damage, which was nice. And for, the subclass feature, which was Hunter, which was, an extra D8. But now we can go Beastmaster, which is way better for us, right? So this is an answer to my prayers. You can take Beast of the Air as your primal companion, and just like your familiar, they can swoop in, make an attack, and then fly away without getting an opportunity attack, and then also leaving that enemy that you have attacked and moved away from alone, right? And without an enemy in melee range, ideally, so that they're going to have to move and take that additional booming blade damage. It's perfect. It's perfect. So you're going to start a custom lineage, custom elf, again, if your DM allows it. Take the magic initiate, though, for your free feat still. So you're going to put your +2 ability score into dexterity, so you're at a 17 dexterity. But you still want that magic initiate feat, because having your familiar and, more importantly, booming blade were really integral to this build, right? So we're still going to do that. But then at level 4, you've got a 17 dexterity. You're going to want to take Elven Accuracy, if you can, to bump your dexterity to 18 and then also give you triple advantage. Remember, you're making one big attack every turn and then backing off and having advantage, not only advantage, but triple advantage on that one big attack is so huge. It feels terrible when you have one big attack per turn and it misses, right? And this is going to make it hardly ever miss. If you cannot get Elven Accuracy and the custom lineage feat, race, I guess, I'd probably go with the Piercer feat, the new Piercer feat from Tasha's, because that will also give you a +1 to your dex and give you a little bit of extra damage, potentially, on those rapier attacks that you will be making. Let's see. So you're starting off, you're going 3 levels of Rogue, just like before, up to Swashbuckler, and then 3 levels of Ranger. But when you hit level 3 Ranger, you're going Beastmaster all day, and now you are running around with not one bird, because you had the familiar owl, but 2 birds of prey. And since you're a Swashbuckler, you should totally take a parrot. Your primal companion should take the form of a parrot, and then the parrot and the owl will just squabble all the time for your affection and or crackers, and hilarity will ensue. Let's see. Remember, your primal companion, new to Tasha's again, like we talked about last week, they hit based on your spell modifier, which is Wisdom, as a hunter. When it hits, it does a D4 +3 plus your proficiency bonus in damage, which is way better than the D8 that we were getting from Hunter. It scales, and this build got a nice little buff, and I super love it. You probably want to consider bumping your Wisdom score after you max your dexterity with this character, so that your companion will hit more regularly. And rogues like Wisdom anyway, because you often rely on your perception to detect traps and secret doors and things like that. So it's great. A strong-ish argument could be made here for going all the way to Ranger level 5. I don't like it because, like with my Bard builds, I wanted, usually when you play a rogue, it's because you want to be a rogue, right? And you want to be the one scouting ahead and stealthing and detecting traps and picking locks and all of those things. And if this is a low level, even to mid-level campaign, Ranger 5, Rogue 3 or 4, I mean, that's not a rogue anymore. That's a Ranger with a rogue dip, right? But I mean, you get extra attack as Ranger 5, but actually we wouldn't want it really, because we were doing Booming Blade and moving, and they will take more damage from that than an extra attack. So that's a little The thing that I love about getting to Ranger 5 is getting access to the Summon Beast spell. Because I just love the idea of having three birds. You are a walking Alfred Hitchcock. The birds. You are the master of ravens, and you would be glorious. But I would probably stop at 3, because 2 levels is a pretty big investment. Even though that spell is really nice and it would bump your damage, you would be then, of course, giving up some extra sneak attack damage and all of the other cool rogue features like expertise and evasion and all the things that you took a rogue for in the first place, right? So the new subclasses that Tasha's introduces for rogues are really cool. I'm probably not going to take them for this build, right? The Phantom, the Soul Knife, they seem cool, they seem fun, but we were pretty dependent on some Swashbuckler features, particularly the ability to move away without taking an opportunity attack. I'm sure I'll do builds on them in the future. Favorite magic items here would be the Shadowfell brand tattoo. I love the concept of the tattoos. They're not always particularly useful or applicable in the game, at least not from a number crunching perspective, in my opinion. But the Shadowfell brand tattoo is really cool. It gives you advantage on your stealth rolls. What rogue doesn't want that? And lets you have the damage, cut the damage in half that you take from an attack or something once per day. So super nice, really cool magic item. And that's it. That's it for this build, and that's it for this episode. So, final thoughts. As I've mentioned, the numbers and the graphs are all updated, so please do check the show notes or video description for that. I have been trying to segment the videos and include timestamps in there. I know some of you have mentioned that you appreciate that. I'm trying to take baby steps to make little improvements as we go. Do me a favor, if you would, and give the podcast a little love. It's been gaining steam a little bit, but if you listen to podcasts or subscribe to podcasts at all, do me a solid and subscribe to D&D Optimized wherever you get your podcasts. It's available, and maybe a review, especially with a 5-star review, and say something nice. That would be cool, and I would be grateful. But don't feel obligated. At the end of the day, I appreciate you guys being here. So subscribe, like, follow, and comment. And don't forget about the Reddit. As I mentioned, would love to have more participation from the community there, talking and theory crafting and answering each other's questions. And, find me on Facebook and on Twitter. I don't have a lot of followers, and that's okay. I don't make a lot of posts, but I make a few here and there. But you can use that to contact me if you need to, because, as always, if you have a specific build that you would like me to do an episode on and really try and dig into, get me as much detail as you can on that build and what the goal of it would be and what subclasses you might want to take and all of those kinds of things. And I will do my best to optimize it for you. Thank you, everybody. I love you guys. You're awesome. Have a fantastic day, and we will see you soon.